AITA for telling my best friend I don't want to be her maid of honor because she's not supportive of my wedding. I, 29F, have been friends with Olivia, 30F, for about 12 years. We met in college and instantly hit it off. We've been through thick and thin together, and I've always considered her to be one of my closest friends. So when I got engaged to my fiancé, John, 32M, last year, I immediately asked Olivia to be my maid of honor. She was thrilled, and I was so happy to have her by my side. A little background on my relationship with John. We've been together for 4 years, and we have a pretty solid, loving relationship. There aren't any major red flags or anything like that, but we did go through some tough times in the first year or so, mostly figuring out communication and learning how to deal with each other's families. But after those initial bumps, things have been smooth sailing. Olivia and I have always had a somewhat competitive friendship, but it never really bothered me. I've always been the go-with-the-flow type, while she tends to be a bit more controlling and likes things to go her way. It hasn't been an issue in the past because we've always respected each other's boundaries, and I thought we were on the same page when it came to supporting one another. However, things started to change when I began planning my wedding. From the very beginning, Olivia seemed less excited for me than I expected. I would bring up wedding details, and she would act either disinterested or even dismissive. For example, when I showed her my dress, she barely reacted. She didn't even say it was pretty. She just asked if it was really my style. When I shared the wedding venue I'd booked, she was quick to point out how expensive it was and how unnecessary it seemed. Every time I would talk about my wedding plans, Olivia seemed to find a way to make it about her or criticize my choices. Then things took a turn when I told her I was thinking of not inviting some of our mutual friends to the wedding. Olivia is very close with these friends, and she was upset that I didn't want to invite them. I had valid reasons, such as wanting to keep the guest list intimate and the fact that a few of these friends weren't particularly supportive of my relationship with John in the past. Instead of understanding my perspective, Olivia became angry and told me that I was being selfish for not inviting everyone she wanted. She even said I was ruining the friendship by not accommodating everyone's expectations. As time went on, it became more and more apparent that Olivia wasn't happy about my wedding. When I asked her to help me with wedding-related tasks, she would cancel plans last minute or show up late. Once I had asked her to help me with dress shopping, and she showed up 2 hours late, barely apologized, and then spent the whole time complaining about how expensive everything was and how unrealistic my vision was. She even suggested I might be rushing into things and that I should take a step back and reconsider marrying John. At this point, I was really starting to feel like she wasn't being a good friend. But I didn't want to overreact, so I tried to brush it off. However, the straw that broke the camel's back came a couple of weeks ago. Olivia and I had a long conversation about wedding planning, and I brought up how stressed I was about balancing everything. She, instead of offering support, said, "Well, if you weren't so obsessed with making this wedding perfect, maybe you'd feel better." I was stunned. I had never once expected her to help me plan every detail, but I did expect basic emotional support, especially since I had been there for her through some of her own big life events, including her engagement, her move to another state, and her family issues. After this conversation, I realized that I couldn't have Olivia standing by my side as my maid of honor. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the lack of support and respect I was receiving from someone I consider my best friend. I felt like she was actively trying to make my special day more about her discomfort than about celebrating my marriage. So, I decided to have a heart-to-heart with Olivia. I told her that I no longer felt comfortable with her being my maid of honor because I didn't feel like she was being supportive of my wedding or my relationship with John. I explained that I loved her, but I needed someone who would be genuinely happy for me and would help me without undermining my choices. I also emphasized that this wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it had become clear that the way she was acting was negatively impacting my wedding planning process and my mental health. Olivia was devastated. She started crying and accused me of being too sensitive and dramatic. She said that I was overreacting and that I was making her feel like a terrible friend. She insisted that she was just being honest with me and that I shouldn't take her opinions so personally. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her opinions, but the fact that she wasn't showing any enthusiasm or support for me. She didn't take it well and said she didn't want to be involved in the wedding at all anymore. Now, things are really awkward between us. She hasn't reached out to me in over a week, and I've been receiving messages from our mutual friends asking me why I fired Olivia as my maid of honor. Some of them think I overreacted, and others are telling me I did the right thing, but I feel so conflicted. I want my wedding to be a happy occasion, but I also don't want to lose a friendship over it. At the same time, I feel like Olivia's behavior wasn't fair to me, and I shouldn't have to settle for someone who doesn't support my choices. So, AITA for telling my best friend I don't want her to be my maid of honor because she hasn't been supportive of my wedding. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for exposing my sister-in-law's secret affair to my brother after she manipulated me into keeping it quiet. I, 29F, have a brother, 32M, who has been married to my sister-in-law, Emily, 30F, for about 5 years. They have 2 kids, a 4-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. While we've always had a somewhat strained relationship, I have tried my best to stay close with her because she's my brother's wife and the mother of his kids. But Emily is the kind of person who can be incredibly charming one minute and then completely self-centered the next. I guess that's just how she is. About 6 months ago, I found out something that I never thought I'd find out. Emily was having an affair. To be honest, I didn't believe it at first. I had always thought Emily was a bit of a party girl, but she seemed to love my brother. They seemed happy enough, at least on the surface. But one night, my best friend's sister, who is close with Emily, confided in me that she'd seen Emily with another man a few times. She'd overheard her talking on the phone, and it was clear that something was going on. At first, I thought it was just gossip, but then more things came to light, and the evidence became undeniable. I didn't want to be the one to break this news to my brother, especially since Emily had a history of manipulating people and making everything look like someone else's fault. But when I brought up the possibility with my best friend, she told me that I should tell my brother that he had a right to know. So, I spent weeks debating whether I should keep quiet or confront Emily directly. Ultimately, I decided to talk to her first. If she admitted it and had some kind of remorse or explanation, then I would feel better about not saying anything. I tried to talk to Emily alone, but she deflected every time. She knew something was up, so she'd either change the subject or pretend to be busy. Finally, one evening, after a family dinner, I cornered her in the hallway. I told her that I knew about the affair, and I was not going to stay silent if she didn't come clean to my brother. She looked absolutely panicked for a moment, but then she did what she does best. She turned on the charm. She begged me not to tell my brother, saying that it would destroy him. She insisted that it was a mistake, and she was working through it, and that if I told him, it would tear the family apart. She promised me that she was going to end things with the other guy, and that everything would be fine if I just gave her some time. I told her I needed to think about it, but deep down, I felt uncomfortable. It wasn't just about my brother. This was about her lying to his face and betraying his trust. A week passed, and I had tried to avoid the situation, but I was getting more and more frustrated. She wasn't changing. The affair was still going on. I found out from a mutual friend that Emily had gone on a weekend getaway with the guy she was seeing, and it was clear she had no intentions of ending things. At that point, I felt stuck. If I kept quiet, I would be betraying my brother. But if I exposed her, she would likely turn everyone against me, just like she always does when she's backed into a corner. Still, I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. My brother deserved the truth, even if it ruined everything. I called him one evening and told him we needed to talk. I didn't tell him what it was about, just that it was important. When we sat down, I could see the confusion on his face. I started by asking if he had any concerns about his marriage, if anything had fell off lately. He told me that he trusted Emily completely and everything was fine. But the more I prodded, the more he started to look uneasy. I finally blurted it out. Emily's having an affair. The look on his face was one of complete shock and disbelief. He stared at me for a long moment before asking for proof. I didn't have photos or hard evidence, but I had enough for what I had gathered. I told him about the phone calls I'd overheard, the weekend trip, and the information from our mutual friends. He was silent for a while, but I could see that he was processing what I had said. Finally, he stood up, walked to the door, and said, "I need to talk to her." I knew it was going to hit him hard, and I felt awful for being the one to break it to him, but I also knew he needed to know. A few hours later, I got a call from my brother. He told me that Emily had denied everything, of course, and was doing everything she could to deflect the blame. But eventually, she broke down and admitted it was true. He was devastated. The fallout was nothing short of brutal. Emily tried to turn everything around on me, claiming I was just trying to ruin her marriage. She even said I had an ulterior motive, accusing me of wanting to break them up so I could have my brother to myself. This didn't just hurt me, it hurt our whole family. My parents sided with her at first, but when they saw how much my brother was suffering, they came around. My brother was heartbroken, not just because of the affair, but because of how Emily had manipulated everyone around her. He tried to work things out with her, but she was stubborn, and it eventually became clear that she wasn't going to change. They separated, and a few months later, they got a divorce. My brother's been in therapy, and I've been there for him every step of the way. Emily, on the other hand, went completely silent after the divorce was finalized. She stopped talking to me, and I'm pretty sure she told everyone I was the one who destroyed her life. I tried reaching out to her a few times, but she ignored me, and now it feels like she's gone completely off the radar. Some of my family members have told me that I could have handled it differently, that I should have given her more time or kept quiet. A few of them even think I should have never gotten involved in the first place. They say I've ruined everything, but I just couldn't stand by while she kept hurting my brother. So, AITA for exposing Emily's affair to my brother, or should I have kept quiet and let them work it out on their own? AITA for telling my best friend that I couldn't attend her wedding because I didn't like her fiancé and was uncomfortable with the way he treated me. So here's the deal. I, 28F, have been best friends with Sarah, 29F, since we were both 12 years old. We've been through everything together. High school drama, breakups, family stuff, you name it. We've always been super close. Around 2 years ago, Sarah met Tom, 32M, and they hit it off immediately. I wasn't initially thrilled about him, but I thought I was just being a little protective of my best friend. As time went on, though, I began to notice some things about Tom that made me feel uneasy. First off, he seemed to have a lot of control over Sarah. Every time we'd hang out, he'd call or text her constantly, asking where she was and what she was doing, and sometimes he would even show up uninvited. I would try to have a girls' night, but Sarah would always cancel last minute, saying Tom needed her or wanted to hang out. It started to feel like he was isolating her from everyone, but I didn't want to sound like I was being overly critical, so I kept quiet. Things got worse when we went on a trip to the beach with a group of friends. Tom came along, of course, and he spent most of the trip hovering over Sarah, telling her where she could and couldn't go, who she could and couldn't talk to. One evening, a few of us went out for drinks, and Sarah wanted to join us, but Tom made it clear that he didn't want her out without him. It felt weird, and when I pointed out that she was an adult and should be able to have fun with her friends, he snapped at me, telling me to mind my business. I thought maybe I was just overreacting, so I didn't bring it up to Sarah. But then I started noticing how he would make little passive-aggressive comments towards me, especially when Sarah wasn't around. He'd joke about how I was single and probably didn't understand what real love was, or how I shouldn't be so overbearing towards Sarah since I was so clingy. I try not to let it bother me, but over time, I started feeling like Tom was making digs at my character. The worst part was that Sarah didn't seem to notice, or at least she didn't care. Fast forward to the present, and Sarah is engaged to Tom. When she told me about the proposal, I was happy for her, but I also felt an uncomfortable pit in my stomach. I wasn't excited. I wasn't even sure I could be genuinely happy for her. And it wasn't because I didn't want her to be happy, but because I felt like Tom was bad news. She asked me to be a bridesmaid, and I agreed, even though I wasn't thrilled. I thought I could put my feelings aside for her, but the more I spent time around Tom, the more I realized that I just couldn't do it. He made me feel like I was walking on eggshells whenever we were in the same room. If I said something he didn't like, he'd make a sarcastic remark. If I laughed too loud, he'd shoot me a dirty look. It was like he was trying to make me feel small, and it was affecting my relationship with Sarah. One evening, about a month ago, Sarah and I were having a heart-to-heart. She asked me if I was excited about the wedding, and I couldn't lie to her anymore. I told her that, to be honest, I wasn't comfortable with Tom. I told her that I felt like he was controlling and dismissive towards me, and that I didn't think he treated her with the respect she deserved. I didn't say anything about how I felt about their relationship, but I made it clear that I was uncomfortable around him. Sarah was shocked. She told me that I didn't understand their relationship, and that Tom was just protective because he loved her so much. She said I was being dramatic and that I should trust her judgment because she knew him better than anyone. She also said that my attitude was hurting her and that I should stop being so negative about her fiancé. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to ruin her relationship, but I couldn't deny how uncomfortable I felt. She told me that I was being selfish and that my jealousy was clouding my judgment. I told her that I wasn't jealous. I just didn't like the way Tom treated me and, by extension, how I felt like he was changing her. She didn't take it well and ended the conversation by telling me I needed to get over myself if I wanted to be a part of her wedding. I thought about it for a while and eventually decided that I couldn't be in her wedding. I didn't want to be a bridesmaid for a wedding that I felt uncomfortable with, and I didn't want to have to pretend to be happy for her when I wasn't. So I told Sarah that I couldn't be a bridesmaid, and I explained that it wasn't because I didn't love her, but because I didn't think I could be a part of the wedding given my feelings about Tom. She was furious. She said I was being incredibly disrespectful and that I was ruining our friendship over nothing. She said I was acting like I didn't care about her happiness and that I was letting my silly issues with Tom affect our relationship. I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't listen. She told me that if I couldn't support her decision to marry Tom, then I shouldn't expect to be part of her life anymore. It's been about 3 weeks since that conversation, and we haven't spoken since. I've been feeling really conflicted because I love Sarah, and I hate that our friendship might be ending over this. But at the same time, I feel like I have to stand up for myself and my own feelings. I can't pretend to like someone when I don't, and I don't think it's fair that I'm being told to disregard my own feelings just to keep the peace. I've been wondering if maybe I overstepped. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut and just sucked it up for the sake of her wedding. Maybe I should have just attended and played my part, even if it meant pretending everything was fine. So, AITA for telling my best friend that I couldn't attend her wedding because I didn't like her fiancé and was uncomfortable with the way he treated me. AITA for not attending my brother's wedding because he didn't invite my fiancé. I, 29M, have an older brother, Ben, 34M, who is getting married soon to a woman named Lily. I've always had a bit of a complicated relationship with Ben. Growing up, we were close, but as we got older, we drifted apart. He was the golden child, always excelling in everything, while I was more of a laid-back, creative type who never quite met the high expectations set by our parents. It's not that I didn't try, but it always felt like Ben was the better version of me. Over the years, Ben has made a lot of decisions that have rubbed me the wrong way. He's always been a bit selfish and tends to prioritize his own needs over others. This has been especially clear when it comes to family events. He's known to exclude people from important occasions if they don't fit into his ideal version of a perfect celebration. Last year, I got engaged to my amazing fiancée, Sarah, 30F. She's everything I've ever wanted in a partner: smart, funny, kind, and incredibly supportive. We've been together for 4 years, and I knew she was the one from the moment we met. Our relationship has been nothing short of amazing, and I've never been happier. When Ben announced his engagement to Lily, I was excited for him. Despite our differences, I still wanted to support my brother. I was happy to see him settle down, and I thought maybe this would be an opportunity for us to reconnect. But when I received the wedding invitation, I noticed something strange. Sarah wasn't invited. At first, I thought it was an oversight, so I texted Ben to ask if he had accidentally forgotten to send her an invite. Ben's response was brief and to the point. It's just family, and Sarah doesn't fit the vibe. I was taken aback. I mean, I get that weddings can sometimes have a certain theme or atmosphere, But I wasn't expecting my own brother to flat out exclude my fiancée without any valid reason. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But as the weeks went on, I started to feel more and more hurt by his lack of consideration. I spoke to Sarah about it, and she was understandably upset as well. She had met Ben and Lily a few times and had always been polite and friendly. She had never done anything to offend them, so I didn't understand why they wouldn't want her there. I tried to talk to Ben again, this time in person. I explained how important Sarah was to me and how hurtful it was that she wasn't invited. I even offered to pay for her ticket and accommodation if it was a financial issue. Ben's response was still dismissive. This is a small wedding, and we just don't want too many people. It's not personal, but it felt personal. It felt like Ben was deliberately choosing not to acknowledge Sarah as part of our family, which stung. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more going on that he wasn't telling me. As the wedding day approached, I began to struggle with the idea of attending without Sarah. I knew it would be awkward and uncomfortable. I also started questioning whether I even wanted to be part of a celebration that excluded someone I loved so much. It felt wrong to celebrate my brother's happiness while ignoring the feelings of my fiancée, who had been nothing but supportive of me throughout our relationship. A few days before the wedding, I made the difficult decision to tell Ben that I wouldn't be attending. I texted him, "I've thought about it, and I don't feel right going to the wedding without Sarah. If you can't invite her, then I can't come." I thought he might be disappointed, but I didn't expect the full-blown fallout that followed. Ben immediately called me, and our conversation escalated quickly. He was furious. He accused me of being selfish and trying to ruin his wedding. He claimed that I was putting Sarah above family and that I should be supportive of him no matter what. He also said that I was making a scene over something that wasn't a big deal. I tried to explain that it was a big deal to me and that it wasn't just about the wedding, but about how he was treating Sarah. He wouldn't listen. Our parents got involved, of course. They called me, saying that I was being childish and that I should just go to the wedding and stop causing drama. They told me I was overreacting and that family was more important than a romantic partner. I felt like I was being gaslighted into thinking I was the one in the wrong, and it just made me more upset. I ended up sticking to my decision and not going to the wedding. I stayed home with Sarah, who was, of course, supportive of my decision, though she felt bad about the whole situation. We spent the day together, and while it wasn't the wedding I had envisioned, it was a peaceful, low-stress day with the person I love. After the wedding, things between me and Ben have been awkward. He hasn't spoken to me much, and when we do communicate, it's always tense. Our parents are still trying to convince me to make amends, but I don't know if I want to. I feel like Ben's actions were hurtful and unfair, and I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm constantly expected to put my needs and the needs of my fiancé second. Now, some of my friends are saying that I made the right choice by standing up for Sarah, and that family should understand boundaries. Others, however, believe I should have just gone to the wedding and let it go, claiming that it's just a day and I could have avoided drama for the sake of family unity. I'm starting to second-guess myself. Maybe I should have gone to the wedding for the sake of keeping the peace. Or was I right to stand my ground and refuse to attend a celebration that excluded the person I love? AITA for not going to my brother's wedding because he didn't invite my fiancée? So I, 29F, have a younger sister, Emily, 24F, who has been struggling financially for the last couple of years. Our parents aren't very wealthy, so they haven't been able to offer much help, and I've been the one who's had to step in every time she's fallen behind on bills or had a rough patch. I've helped her with rent, bought her groceries, lent her money, and even let her crash at my place a few times when she had nowhere to go. For context, Emily doesn't have the best work history. She tends to get jobs and then leave them after a few months, usually citing bad management or toxic environments. She also has a habit of living beyond her means. She'll spend money on things like eating out, going to concerts, and buying clothes even when she's struggling to pay her rent. She's had a couple of serious relationships where she's had to move in with her boyfriends, but those never last long, either. The longest she's ever stayed in a job was about a year, and the longest she's ever stayed in a relationship was about 6 months. Recently, Emily lost her job at a marketing agency. She was there for almost 6 months before they let her go. She told me it was because of budget cuts, but from what I've heard from mutual friends, it wasn't really a surprise. She was always showing up late, not meeting her deadlines, and often taking long lunch breaks. Anyway, she called me a few weeks ago, completely distraught, saying she had no money left and that she didn't have anywhere to live. I was sympathetic, of course, but at the same time, I wasn't exactly shocked. She asked if she could move in with me while she looked for a new job. I have a small apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and I work from home. The space is tight, and I'm pretty particular about my living environment. I have a routine, and I like my peace and quiet. I told her I wasn't sure, but I'd think about it. I wanted to help, but I also knew that having her move in would mean major changes to my daily life. I have a partner, Mark, 31M, who stays with me half the week, and while we're both understanding, we value our personal space. Emily moving in would make it more complicated for both of us. After thinking about it, I came to the conclusion that it wasn't a good idea. I texted her a few days later to explain that I just didn't have the space and that it would be too stressful for me. I also told her that I had helped her out many times before, and while I wanted to continue supporting her, I felt like it was time for her to figure things out on her own. I suggested she look into renting a room or finding a roommate situation. She was absolutely furious. She sent me a long message about how I was being selfish and that I was the only family member who could help her. She said I was acting like I didn't care about her and that I was turning my back on her when she needed me most. She said that if our roles were reversed, I would expect her to let me move in with her and that I had no idea how hard her life had been. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring or not wanting to help, but rather about maintaining my own boundaries and living situation. I told her that while I was sympathetic to her situation, I couldn't just drop everything and completely rearrange my life for her. She didn't respond to my messages for a few days, but then she reached out again to say that she was disappointed in me and that I was choosing my comfort over family. It's been a couple of weeks now, and she's still not speaking to me. She's told other family members about what happened, and they've all reached out to me, telling me that I should have let her move in. They say that family should always come first, and that I shouldn't be so harsh when it comes to helping my sister. Some of them even implied that I was being cold-hearted because Emily had nowhere to go, and that she's always been there for me when I needed her. I'm feeling conflicted because on one hand, I do care about my sister and want to help her. But on the other hand, I feel like I've already done enough and that she needs to take responsibility for her own life. I don't think it's healthy for me to let her move in just because she's having a tough time. I don't want to be the person who enables her to keep making the same mistakes. Am I the asshole for not letting her move in with me, even though she's struggling? Should I have sacrificed my own comfort and space to help her, or was I right to set boundaries? AITA for choosing my career over my relationship. Even though my partner is devastated, I, 28F, have been with my boyfriend, Tom, 30M, for about 5 years. We've been living together for 3 of those years, and for most of our relationship, everything was great. We'd have our occasional disagreements, but we generally got along really well, and I thought we were both very much in sync when it came to what we wanted out of life. That was until my career started to take off. A bit of background. I work in advertising, and I've been with the same company since I graduated college. I started out as a junior copywriter, and after years of hard work, I was recently offered the opportunity to become a senior creative director for one of the most high-profile clients the agency has ever worked with. It's a massive career leap for me, and I couldn't have been more excited. The project is not only prestigious, but also offers me a salary that would allow me to achieve financial security I'd only ever dreamed of. I'd be working on an international scale, traveling a lot, and interacting with high-level professionals in the industry. But here's the problem. Tom doesn't want me to take the job. We've talked about my career ambitions before, and he's always known how much I love what I do and how important my career is to me. He's supportive in theory, but as the opportunity got closer, I noticed he started getting more distant. He started making small comments about how much I would have to travel, how much time it would take away from our relationship, and how this would impact us. I thought it was just nervousness at first, but when the offer was officially on the table, his objections became more intense. Tom told me that he didn't want me to take the job because he felt like it would change everything between us. He said he needed more of my time and that if I took this promotion, I'd be too busy for him. He argued that if I really loved him, I'd be willing to put him first and not prioritize my job above our relationship. He also expressed concern that I'd be spending more time with other people than with him and that I'd get swept up in the high-flying world of advertising, forgetting about him. I was really taken aback because this isn't how I imagined things would go. I thought we both understood that my career was important to me and that success meant I'd have the resources to help us build a better future together. But Tom wasn't having it. He said, "I love you, but I don't want to be with someone who doesn't have time for me." We had several long, difficult conversations where I explained how this job wasn't just about the money. It was about my passion for my work and my desire to push myself to the next level. I tried to explain that this was a huge opportunity that I couldn't afford to pass up, both for my personal growth and for the security it would bring us in the long run. I told him that we could make it work, that we could find ways to balance our time, and that the job wouldn't change how much I loved him or how committed I was to our relationship. But Tom wasn't convinced. He became more upset and emotional, saying that he couldn't bear the thought of me being gone all the time, working with people who didn't care about me the way he did. He said he felt like he was always going to be second place, and that hurt him deeply. I was stuck. I didn't want to lose him, but at the same time, I couldn't pass up this opportunity. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for me, and I knew deep down that it would be a huge regret if I didn't take it. But I also didn't want to hurt Tom or make him feel unimportant. The situation escalated when Tom told me that if I accepted the promotion, it would mean the end of our relationship. He said he couldn't stay with someone who didn't prioritize him, and that he would rather break up now than wait for things to inevitably fall apart. He told me that he couldn't keep pretending like he was okay with my career ambitions when they were clearly going to take me away from him. At this point, I was devastated. I didn't want to lose him, but I knew I couldn't give up on my career either. After a few sleepless nights and even more tears, I made the decision to take the job. I felt torn, but I couldn't ignore the fact that this was my dream, and I needed to pursue it for myself. I tried to talk to Tom one last time, but he was adamant that we were done. It's been a few weeks now, and Tom has barely spoken to me. I've tried reaching out to see if we can talk, but he's been cold and distant. Some of my friends have told me that I made the right choice, that I should follow my dreams and not let anyone hold me back. But other friends have said I was too selfish and that I should have tried harder to find a compromise with Tom. I'm heartbroken over the situation, but I still don't regret taking the job. I just feel incredibly guilty for how things turned out with Tom. I thought we were on the same page about what we wanted, but I never realized how much my success would threaten his sense of security in the relationship. So, AITA for choosing my career over my relationship. Even though my partner is devastated, AITA for wanting to stop helping my best friend financially after she got engaged. I, 29F, have been best friends with Lila, 30F, since college. We've been through a lot together, family struggles, breakups, moving to different cities, and everything in between. She's always been there for me, and I've tried my best to be there for her too. The problem started when Lila got engaged a few months ago to her boyfriend, James, 32M. At first, I was thrilled for her. I know she's been with James for about 4 years, and they seemed happy. But soon after the engagement, things started changing in ways I didn't expect. For the last couple of years, Lila has been struggling financially. She works as a marketing manager at a small company, and while she's talented, the pay isn't great, and her company has been cutting hours and bonuses. Lila has been open about her struggles and has been asking me for financial help here and there. Now, I've always been in a better financial position than her. I've been lucky with a decent paying job in tech and have a strong savings account, so I've been happy to help. I've lent her money for bills, groceries, and even a few larger expenses when she was in a bind. I never expected repayment, but I always told her that I'd help as long as she really needed it and that I couldn't keep doing it forever. The situation started to feel a little unbalanced about 6 months ago when I realized I was constantly helping her out. It wasn't just small amounts either. I was giving her hundreds of dollars a month. At that point, I told her that I couldn't continue lending her money without some kind of plan to pay it back or a discussion about budgeting better. She was understanding at first, But then things took a turn when she got engaged. Lila and James started planning their wedding almost immediately. And while I get that weddings are expensive, it felt like she wasn't even considering the financial stress she was under. She asked me if I would contribute to her wedding fund. I love her, so I agreed, but this is where things started to get a little uncomfortable. The more she talked about the wedding, the more it seemed like she was spending beyond her means. She mentioned designer wedding dresses, luxury venues, a full bridal party, and even a destination honeymoon. I was a little shocked because I knew she wasn't financially stable enough to afford any of that. But she insisted that she and James had been saving up and everything would be fine. I figured, okay, maybe they had a plan in place, even if it seemed a little unrealistic. But then she started asking me for money for the wedding. Not just a little, but large sums. She wanted me to help pay for her dress, for the bridesmaids' dresses, and even offered to pay me back after the wedding. When I tried to explain that I couldn't afford to contribute that much, she seemed hurt and confused. She said that I was her best friend, and I should be happy to help her have the wedding of her dreams. I started feeling really uncomfortable with the direction this was going. I've already been giving her money to cover basic expenses, and now she wanted me to pay for a luxury wedding. I also started to feel a little bit resentful that she wasn't asking her fiancé for more help. I get that weddings are traditionally the bride's responsibility, but James is making good money as a lawyer, and they had always presented themselves as a team. Why was it on me to fund her dream wedding? When I asked her if James could contribute more, she brushed it off, saying that he had his own financial responsibilities, and it was easier for her to ask me. Things came to a head a few weeks ago when Lila asked me for a loan to cover some of the wedding planning costs. I told her I simply couldn't do it anymore. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I didn't think it was healthy or sustainable for either of us. I suggested that maybe she and James could cut back on some aspects of the wedding to make it more affordable. She didn't take that well. She was angry and hurt and accused me of not supporting her. She said I was being selfish and not understanding the magnitude of what a wedding means to her. She told me that she had always supported me through thick and thin, and now that she needed me the most, I was abandoning her. It felt like a complete emotional manipulation, and it stung because I had helped her so many times before. I've been feeling conflicted ever since. I don't want to lose my best friend over money, but at the same time, I feel like she's taking advantage of my generosity. I've already helped her so much, and I'm not in a position to keep giving without it affecting my own financial stability. Plus, I feel like I'm enabling her to avoid making the difficult but necessary decisions about her financial future. Now she's barely speaking to me. She keeps texting me, saying things like, I guess I just have to accept that I can't rely on you for this, and it's really sad that you can't be happy for me. I've tried to explain myself, but she doesn't seem to care. Every time I suggest that we just have a normal conversation without money being involved, she gets upset and accuses me of not caring about her wedding. I've been struggling to figure out if I'm in the wrong here. I know weddings are a big deal, but at what point do I have to draw a line? Am I being too harsh by setting boundaries and refusing to help her financially anymore? So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to lend my best friend money for her wedding and other expenses. AITA for telling my sister that her wedding is too expensive and I can't afford to be in it. My 28F sister, 30F, is getting married in a few months. We've always been pretty close, but recently, she's been acting like she's in a whole different world compared to me. It started small, little comments about her job and how much money she makes, how she and her fiancé are going on all these expensive vacations, etc. I'll admit it was a bit envious at first, but I tried to brush it off. She's worked hard, and I don't want to begrudge her success. But then she got engaged, and that's when things started to spiral for me. Her wedding planning went into full swing, and I quickly realized that the whole thing was way beyond anything I could afford. At first, it would just talk about the venue. Apparently, the place she's chosen is this expensive, luxury hotel that's known for its grandeur. It costs thousands just to reserve a space, not including catering, decorations, or any of the other stuff. When she first mentioned it, I didn't think much of it. But then she started talking about the catering, fancy, multi-course meals, an open bar, all this extravagant stuff. And don't even get me started on her dress. It's a designer gown that costs more than a car. I'm not saying she shouldn't have the wedding of her dreams, but I can't even wrap my head around how much this wedding is going to cost. She's talking about spending tens of thousands of dollars, and it's honestly giving me anxiety. I have a decent job, but I'm not making anywhere near what she does, and my savings are much more modest. Plus, I'm trying to pay off student loans and save for my future. Here's where I started to feel the pressure. She asked me to be one of her bridesmaids. I thought this would be exciting, but then she told me that there would be some costs involved. At first, it seemed like the usual dress, shoes, hair, and makeup. No big deal. But then she started sending me these links to super expensive dresses. I'm talking /$ 500 plus for a single dress. I can't afford that, and I told her so. She brushed it off, saying that I could just buy it on credit, or it's an investment because I'll have it for future events. I don't even have a credit card, and I don't want to start putting myself in debt just to be in her wedding. It only got worse from there. She then mentioned that all the bridesmaids would need to contribute to a group gift for her and her fiancé. She wanted to do something really big, like a luxury vacation or a spa retreat. She also made it clear that if we couldn't afford it, we should figure out a way to make it happen. By the time she added in the other expenses, travel to the wedding, accommodation at the hotel, etc., I realized that this was just way beyond my budget. I'm talking well over /$ 500 for the entire event, and that's without even counting any other potential surprises that might pop up. I started to feel really uncomfortable about all of this. I mean, it's her wedding, and she should get what she wants, but at the same time, I didn't want to drown myself in debt just to support her. I tried to talk to her about it calmly and explained that I just couldn't afford everything she was asking. I told her that I wanted to be there for her, but I just couldn't handle the financial burden. Her reaction was, well, less than understanding. She said that if I couldn't afford the wedding, I shouldn't have agreed to be a bridesmaid. She made me feel guilty about it, saying that she was counting on me and that she couldn't imagine her wedding without me standing by her side. She also pointed out that other bridesmaids from her group were happily paying for everything, and I was the only one being difficult. I tried to explain that I'm not being difficult. I just have financial limits, but she didn't really seem to care. It started to feel like she was more interested in the spectacle of her wedding than in my actual well-being. I started to get really frustrated, especially when she compared me to the other bridesmaids who understood the importance of the occasion. In the end, I made a really tough decision. I told her that I couldn't be in her wedding. I said I would still come to the ceremony, but I just couldn't be a bridesmaid. I offered to help in other ways, like helping with decorations or anything else that wasn't financially straining, but I had to be honest about what I could afford. She was absolutely livid. She accused me of ruining her wedding and said that I was being selfish and petty. She told me that I was making her feel embarrassed and that if I really cared about her, I'd do whatever it took to be there for her. She said it wasn't just about money. It was about showing up and being part of her big day. I felt horrible after that conversation, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was being unreasonable. I don't want to lose my sister over something like this, but I also don't think it's fair to expect me to put myself in a financial ruin just for a wedding. Now, my parents are involved, and they're telling me that I should just suck it up and be a bridesmaid, but I'm still standing firm in my decision. I've been trying to explain that I'm not trying to hurt her, but it's like no one understands my side. I feel like I'm being painted as the villain, and I'm honestly not sure if I made the right call. So, AITA for telling my sister I couldn't afford to be in her wedding and deciding to step down as a bridesmaid. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for not wanting to let my sister live with me after she got kicked out. I, 28F, have a sister, 24F, who I'll call Lily. We grew up in a pretty chaotic household. Our parents were always working, so Lily and I essentially raised ourselves. My parents were never very emotionally supportive, but I took on the responsibility of looking after Lily when I was old enough. I've always been the more responsible one, and my sister, well, let's just say she has always been more carefree. Fast forward to today, and we have a complicated relationship. I have a stable job, a steady life, and I've been living on my own in a decent apartment for a few years now. Lily, on the other hand, has bounced around from job to job and relationship to relationship, never really settling. I've always tried to help her out when she's in a bind, but it usually ends up being more stressful than helpful. I've lent her money more times than I can count, and it seems like every time she's in trouble, I'm the first person she turns to. A couple of months ago, Lily's boyfriend kicked her out. They had been living together for a while, and it wasn't the first time they'd had issues, but this time it was apparently the last straw. She didn't have a place to go, and she called me in tears, asking if she could move in with me until she got back on her feet. I don't have a problem with helping her out, but there's a long history here. The last time she stayed with me, things went south fast. She would leave dirty dishes everywhere, ignore the chores we agreed on, and constantly have people over at odd hours. She'd also borrowed my stuff without asking and then forgot to return it. At one point, I found out she'd been using my expensive skincare products without permission. I had to talk with her about boundaries and respect, and she promised to be more mindful, but it didn't last long. After a couple of weeks, I had to ask her to leave because I was overwhelmed and honestly, it wasn't worth the stress. I explained all of this to her when she asked if she could move in again. I told her I didn't think it was a good idea because the last time didn't go well, and I didn't want to end up in the same situation again. I offered to help her find a place to stay or to help her with other resources, but I made it clear that I couldn't have her living with me. She got really upset. She said I was being heartless and that she didn't have anyone else to turn to. She claimed I was abandoning her when she needed me most, and that I was acting like I didn't care about her. I tried to stay calm and explain that it wasn't about not caring, but about needing to set boundaries for my own mental health. I told her that I had worked hard to get where I am and that I needed to protect my space. I didn't expect her to take it well, but what happened next shocked me. She posted on social media about how I was abandoning her and that I was too good for her now that I had my life together. She painted me as the villain, and it honestly felt like she was trying to manipulate people into thinking I was a terrible sister. A few of our mutual friends reached out to me to ask what was going on, and when I explained my side, they seemed to understand. But it still hurt to see her airing our family drama online like that. A few days after that, my mom called me. She was upset and said that I needed to be there for my sister, that I was being selfish by not letting her stay with me. She even said that I should make it work for the sake of family. I tried to explain that I already had my reasons for not wanting her to stay, but she didn't seem to care. My mom implied that I was too busy with my own life and didn't want to help out my sister in her time of need. This whole situation has been weighing on me. I feel like I'm caught between my mom, who wants me to help Lily no matter what, and my own well-being. I'm tired of being the one who's expected to always be the solution to Lily's problems. It feels like I'm the only one who sets any boundaries, and no one else in the family seems to care about my needs or feelings. My mom has always been the type to prioritize family at all costs, even if it means sacrificing personal boundaries, and she seems to think I should just do the same. To be clear, I'm not saying I don't love my sister. I do, but I feel like I've been pushed to my limit when it comes to helping her, especially when it's at the cost of my own peace and stability. I've told her multiple times that I'm here to support her emotionally, but I can't be her safety net every time things go wrong. I've worked hard to create a life that's stable and peaceful, and I don't want to risk losing that. I know I'm probably coming off as cold or unsympathetic, but I honestly feel like I've done everything I can for Lily over the years. I've given her money when she was short, let her crash on my couch more times than I can count, and even helped her with job searches. But at some point, I have to prioritize my own mental health and peace of mind. So, AITA for not wanting to let my sister move in with me again? Am I wrong for setting boundaries and not being there for her in the way she wants? I really want to help, but I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm constantly drained and unhappy. I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but I just feel like I'm at my breaking point. AITA for not letting my wife name our daughter after her late mother despite her insisting on it? So, I, 34M, am married to my wife, Emma, 32F. We've been together for 7 years, and for the most part, our relationship has been great. We've always had open communication and mutual respect, but we're facing a situation that's been causing a lot of tension in our marriage. Emma and I are expecting our first child together, a daughter. We've had a lot of discussions about what to name her, and while we've both had some ideas, we were still figuring out what felt right. That is, until Emma started pushing for the name Elaine after her late mother. Emma's mother passed away when she was 15, and it's clear that her mom had a huge impact on her life. Emma has always spoken very highly of her, and I completely understand why she wants to honor her memory. The thing is, I really don't like the name. It's not that I have anything against her mother, but I've never been a fan of the name Elaine. It feels old-fashioned to me, and I don't think it's something that would suit our daughter. We've been talking about how we want to choose a name that's modern, but still has meaning. I suggested some names, like Lily, Emma, and even Grace, which I thought had a beautiful ring to them. But every time I bring up alternatives, Emma gets really upset. I try to be understanding and respectful about her feelings, but I just can't get behind naming our daughter Elaine. We've had a few arguments about it, and the tension is definitely growing. Emma says I'm being selfish and that it's incredibly important to her that we name our daughter after her mother. She says that it would make her feel like her mom is still a part of her life and that naming her daughter Elaine would be a way of honoring her legacy. I understand where she's coming from, but I just don't feel comfortable with it. I try to explain to Emma that this is also our daughter's name, and I want it to be something that we both love. I told her that while I respect the connection she has to her mother, we should be choosing a name that feels right for both of us. And that's not going to happen if I'm only going along with her suggestion because I feel pressured. The problem is every time I try to suggest an alternative name, Emma either gets quiet and distant or gets really emotional. She's been crying a lot, saying I'm taking away one of the last ways she can hold on to her mother. And I've been feeling really guilty. I don't want to hurt her, but I also don't want to compromise on something that feels so important to me. One of my friends even told me that I was being unreasonable and that this was a chance for me to be more understanding and supportive of Emma's grief. He said that it's not just about the name, it's about Emma's need to keep a connection with her mom. But I'm struggling with the idea that I should just give in to this because it feels like my feelings are being ignored. I think this is an important decision for both of us to make, and I'm not comfortable with her taking the lead on this without considering how I feel. I've even suggested a compromise. We could give our daughter the middle name Elaine in honor of her mom, while giving her a first name that we both love. But Emma wasn't having it. She insists that the first name has to be Elaine, or she won't feel like we're properly honoring her mother. I've spent hours trying to come up with ways to make this work, but nothing seems to be good enough for Emma. I've even considered the possibility that this issue could affect our relationship long-term. I love her, but I feel like we're reaching an impasse, and I'm scared that if I give in, I'll be resenting the name for the rest of my life. On the other hand, I don't want to hurt Emma or make her feel like I don't care about her mom's memory. So, I'm left wondering, AITA for not wanting to name our daughter Elaine and sticking to my guns about wanting to pick a name we both love? Should I just let it go and give her the name she wants? Or am I being unreasonable in wanting to find a middle ground? Any advice would be appreciated, but please be kind. I'm feeling pretty torn. AITA for ruining my friend's engagement by telling her fiancé that she cheated on him? 25F. Have been friends with my best friend Sarah, 25F, since we were kids. We grew up together, did everything together, and shared every little detail of our lives. Now, we're both adults, but I always thought we'd be able to continue supporting each other, no matter what. However, this last year has been rough, and I feel like I've been put in an impossible position. Sarah has been dating Alex, 28M, for about 3 years now. I met him a few months after they started dating, and I genuinely liked him at first. He's funny, thoughtful, and overall a great guy. But over time, I started noticing some red flags that made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to be the jealous best friend or the overprotective friend, so I kept my mouth shut and tried to mind my business. However, things took a turn for the worse when Sarah started confiding in me about some issues in her relationship. Sarah told me, more than once, that she felt distant from Alex. They had been arguing a lot, and she felt like they weren't on the same page about big life decisions. At first, I thought it was just typical relationship stuff, but then she started talking about how Alex had been constantly checking her phone and tracking her social media. She also told me that he'd been asking about her whereabouts a lot, and even questioning why she was going out with friends without him. It started to sound like controlling behavior, and I didn't like it. I asked her why she was still with him, if she was feeling so uncomfortable. She seemed torn but said she didn't want to give up on the relationship, so I respected that. I wasn't sure what to think at this point, so I kept my thoughts to myself and just tried to support her in whatever way I could. Then, a couple of months ago, I found out something that would change everything. I was going through my Instagram DMs when I saw a message from a guy I didn't recognize. I opened it, and it was from someone named Mark asking me if I knew Sarah. Confused, I replied and learned that Mark had been seeing Sarah on the side for a few months. He told me they had been having an affair for the last 6 months and that he didn't know how to tell Alex. I was floored. I felt like I couldn't breathe for a second. I knew Sarah had been distant from Alex, but I had no idea it was because she was cheating on him. After talking to Mark for a little while, I confirmed that what he was saying was true. Sarah had been sleeping with him behind Alex's back. The worst part was that she hadn't mentioned this to me at all. Sarah had never confided in me about this affair, and yet here I was, finding out from a complete stranger. I felt betrayed and hurt by her. She had kept such a huge secret from me, and I was supposed to just ignore it and pretend everything was fine. I also felt incredibly guilty because I had been supporting Sarah while she was deceiving her boyfriend, and I hadn't even known. I went home that night and thought long and hard about what to do. I considered confronting Sarah, but I also knew that if I did that, it might ruin our friendship for good. On the other hand, I knew I couldn't just let Alex continue to live in a lie. He deserved the truth, even if it was painful. I thought about it for days and felt stuck. If I told Alex, I'd be betraying Sarah, but if I didn't, I'd be betraying Alex. After much deliberation, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I sent a message to Alex explaining that I needed to talk to him in person. We met up a few days later at a coffee shop, and I told him everything. I told him about Sarah's affair with Mark, how long it had been going on, and how I had found out. I could see the pain in Alex's eyes as I spoke. He didn't say much at first, just sat there, staring at me, as if trying to process what I was telling him. When I finished, Alex thanked me for being honest, and we agreed that he would talk to Sarah about it. I didn't hear from him for a few days, but when I finally did, it was to let me know that he had called off their engagement. He said that he couldn't forgive her for what she had done, and he felt completely betrayed. He was devastated, but he also knew that he couldn't continue with the relationship. A few days after that, I got a message from Sarah asking me why I'd ruined everything by telling Alex. She said that I had no right to interfere in her personal life and that I should have stayed out of it. She told me that I had destroyed her relationship and was now making things unbearable for her. She accused me of trying to take her life apart just because I didn't like Alex. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel that I had done the right thing. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't let her keep deceiving Alex. It wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to me either. She was my best friend, but she had betrayed me by not being honest with me about what was going on. I understood why she was upset, but I didn't think I could have handled it any other way. Now Sarah is no longer talking to me, and Alex and I have both moved on from the situation. I feel like I've lost a friend, but I also feel like I did what was necessary. I know this might sound harsh, but I can't help but wonder if I was right to tell Alex. AITA for telling him the truth, or should I have stayed silent and let her handle it in her own way? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of her behavior toward my fiancé. I've been best friends with Katie for over 12 years. We've been through everything together: school, relationships, career changes, moving to new cities, and even supporting each other through family tragedies. For the most part, I've always felt like we had each other's backs. We're practically sisters, or at least that's how I've always seen it. But recently, things have started to shift, and I'm not sure if I'm the one being unreasonable or if she's truly in the wrong. The issue started about 6 months ago when my fiancé, Mark, and I got engaged. We were both ecstatic, of course, and naturally, we shared the news with Katie right away. Her reaction, however, was not what I expected. At first, she seemed excited, which I thought was genuine. But as time went on, her attitude started to change. She would make subtle comments about my relationship with Mark, like how I was settling or that I could do better. It didn't sit right with me, but I brushed it off. I thought maybe it was just her being dramatic or insecure about her own love life. She was single at the time. Things got worse as the wedding planning went on. Katie started to make frequent snide remarks about Mark. It started off with small things like questioning how he treated me or how we were handling finances. At one point, she even told me that she didn't think we were compatible and that our relationship was too easy. She said, "A relationship shouldn't be this comfortable. There should be some fire or conflict." I was taken back by that, but I kept my cool and told her that every relationship is different. Mark noticed the tension too, but he never said much. He was trying to be polite and keep the peace, but I could tell it bothered him. It reached a point where Katie started commenting on every little thing Mark did, even when he wasn't around. She told me once that she didn't like how he dressed and that he looked too casual for someone who was about to be your husband. I couldn't believe it. She was being openly critical and disrespectful towards him, and I didn't know how to address it without making things awkward. Then, a few weeks ago, Katie asked me to be her maid of honor at her wedding. I was honored, of course, and I said yes immediately. But as the wedding date got closer, her behavior towards me took another sharp turn. She started to act as though I was inconveniencing her with my wedding planning. For example, when I asked her to be a bridesmaid at my wedding, she gave me a long speech about how she was so busy with her own wedding and that she might not have time to dedicate to mine. I understood she was busy, but this felt like a blatant excuse. I told her that I wasn't asking her to dedicate her whole life to my wedding, just to show up and support me. She then accused me of being too demanding and said that she didn't think it was fair that I expected her to prioritize my wedding over hers. It stung. I've always supported her, no questions asked. I had been there for every big moment in her life. But now, it seemed like she couldn't even be bothered to return the favor. At this point, things had become incredibly tense between us. Katie was no longer acting like my best friend, but more like someone who was resentful of my happiness. I noticed that whenever Mark and I would talk about wedding plans, she would subtly change the subject or make a sarcastic comment. It was clear to me that she was uncomfortable with the fact that I was getting married. But the worst part came when she asked me to attend her wedding and specifically told me that Mark isn't invited because he isn't part of our history. I was stunned. I asked her why she would exclude my fiancé from her wedding, especially considering that we had been together for over 2 years at that point, and he was a big part of my life. She said that since she and I had grown up together, she didn't think he belonged at her wedding. She also insinuated that he wasn't worthy of being there, based on the fact that he didn't have the same background as her other friends. I felt insulted, and so did Mark. We had been through a lot together, and to hear that she didn't even consider him a part of her life made me incredibly upset. I explained to Katie that I couldn't attend her wedding without Mark. She seemed genuinely surprised and said, "Well, if that's how you feel, then I guess I'll see you at the wedding." There was no apology, no attempt to understand my feelings. It was as though she expected me to just accept her decision. I didn't want to cause drama, but this was the breaking point for me. I had to make a choice. After all these years of friendship, was I really going to put up with this behavior? I talked to Mark about it, and he agreed that I shouldn't attend a wedding where I'm expected to choose between him and my best friend. I sent Katie a message explaining how I felt. I told her that her behavior towards Mark and me had become increasingly hurtful, and I couldn't continue to tolerate the way she was treating us. I told her that while I valued our friendship, I couldn't attend her wedding under the current circumstances. She responded with a text that essentially said I was being selfish and that I was choosing a man over her. She accused me of being too wrapped up in my relationship and that I should remember who was there for me before he came along. I've been struggling ever since. Part of me feels like I've done the right thing. I've always been supportive of her, but I can't continue to sacrifice my own happiness and respect for her whims. However, another part of me feels guilty. This is my best friend, and I've always dreamed of being by her side at her wedding, just as she has been by mine. I've been replaying the situation over and over in my head, wondering if maybe I overreacted. So, AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of how she's treated my fiancé. AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding after my family demanded I contribute even though I wasn't invited. So, a little background. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I have an older sister, Rachel, who is 31. We've always had a bit of a rocky relationship, but things really hit a low point a couple of years ago. I'll explain why before getting to the issue at hand. Rachel has always been more of the golden child in our family. She's very outgoing, very social, and has always been the one to get the most attention. I've been the quieter, more introverted one, and while I don't resent her for that, I've always felt like I've been overlooked or pushed aside in favor of Rachel. Growing up, it wasn't uncommon for my parents and extended family to compare me to her, making me feel like I wasn't living up to expectations. About 5 years ago, I started dating someone seriously, Tom. We were together for 3 years, and during that time, Rachel and I were hardly on speaking terms. I didn't mind it much at first because I was focused on my relationship, but Rachel made a point of creating drama around my relationship. She would always joke about how Tom was too good for me or how I couldn't possibly keep a man like him, which eventually led to a huge falling out. I ended up distancing myself from her, especially after I found out she had been telling other family members that Tom was controlling and manipulative, even though he wasn't. Tom and I broke up about a year ago, and I've been healing from that, but my relationship with Rachel hasn't improved. She never apologized for how she treated me during my relationship, and frankly, I don't think she ever will. Now, the wedding situation. Rachel recently got engaged to a guy named Matt and announced that they were planning a wedding in about 6 months. From the get-go, I knew there would be tension. I didn't expect to be involved in the wedding in any way, given how little we speak, but I also didn't expect the chaos that followed. Rachel's wedding planning has been stressful, to say the least. She's had multiple breakdowns, and I've heard through the grapevine that her fiancé's family isn't thrilled with her choices either. But that's not my issue. The issue started when my parents called me a month ago and told me that Rachel was asking for financial help at the wedding. They told me that Rachel needed to cover some of the major expenses for the wedding, specifically the venue, catering, and photographer, but she didn't have enough funds on her own. My parents said that they were chipping a little, but it wouldn't be enough to cover everything, and Rachel had requested that I contribute a significant amount. At first, I was shocked. I hadn't been invited to the wedding, nor had I been consulted about helping in any way. In fact, Rachel had made it clear when the engagement was announced that I wasn't going to be a bridesmaid. She didn't seem to want me involved in any aspect of her wedding, which made sense given our relationship, but I didn't think she would ask for money. I told my parents that I couldn't justify giving money for an event I wasn't even invited to, especially when our relationship was still strained. They insisted that family should support each other, especially when it comes to weddings, and that this was a big milestone for Rachel. They said it would mean a lot to Rachel if I contributed, and that I shouldn't let petty issues come between us. They told me that it was the right thing to do, and that if I didn't help out, I would look bad in front of the whole family. To say I was angry would be an understatement. Not only had Rachel not invited me, but she had also treated me poorly for years, and now she was asking for money like nothing had ever happened. I explained to my parents that I didn't have a close relationship with Rachel, and I didn't feel comfortable financially supporting an event where I was not even acknowledged. My parents said I was being childish and selfish, and that family loyalty should come first, no matter how strained the relationship. The pressure didn't stop there. My extended family got involved, sending me messages asking why I wasn't contributing. They said it wasn't just about the money, it was about being a supportive sister. The guilt tripping reached its peak when Rachel herself texted me, saying that she was really hurt by my decision not to help and that it wasn't about the money, it was about family. She said I was making everything about myself and that this wedding should have been a chance for us to put our differences aside. I haven't responded to her text. The whole situation has made me feel like I'm being taken advantage of. On one hand, I do feel bad that she's having a hard time with her wedding planning, but on the other hand, I don't feel like I owe her anything, especially after everything she put me through. I know weddings are expensive, but I just can't get past the fact that she has treated me poorly for years and now expects me to bail her out. I've been asking myself if I'm being unreasonable. I don't want to cause drama, but I also don't feel like I should have to pay for a wedding I'm not even invited to. I feel stuck between wanting to keep the peace and standing my ground for my own boundaries. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's wedding even though my family is pressuring me to do so. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she asked me to cut ties with my best friend. So, a bit of background. I'm a 27-year-old woman and my sister is 30. We've always had a somewhat strained relationship, especially as we got older. She's always been the more traditional type, and I've always been the more free-spirited one. We don't have major blowouts, but we definitely clash from time to time, particularly when it comes to life choices. Now, to the actual story. My sister is getting married in a few months, and we had some tension leading up to the wedding. The main issue is that she has a problem with my best friend, Sophie, who I've known since we were 10 years old. Sophie is a huge part of my life, and honestly, I consider her more like family than some of my own relatives. The issue started years ago when Sophie and my sister didn't get along. I think the root cause is that Sophie is openly queer, and my sister, while she'd never say anything outright, is very conservative in her views. It's not just Sophie either. She's made it clear that she's uncomfortable with a lot of my friends because of their non-traditional lifestyles, but Sophie just happens to be the one she's been the most vocal about. At first, I tried to keep the peace, telling Sophie to tone it down when we were around my sister, but that never worked. Sophie shouldn't have to hide who she is, and frankly, it was making me feel uncomfortable too. Eventually, I just stopped trying to mediate. I didn't want to choose between my sister and my best friend, so I decided to let them sort out their issues on their own, and it seemed like things just stayed awkward but manageable. However, things took a turn when my sister started planning her wedding. She told me that she couldn't have Sophie there because it would make things uncomfortable for everyone. I was shocked and asked her what exactly she meant by that. She explained that Sophie's presence at the wedding would bring negativity, and she didn't want it to ruin her special day. I was furious. I asked my sister how she could seriously tell me to not invite one of the most important people in my life just because of her personal discomfort with who Sophie is. My sister said she wasn't asking me to cut Sophie off completely, just that I should understand that some things were too important to compromise on, and this was her big day. I told her that it wasn't fair to make me choose between my family and my best friend, especially when I've supported her through every major life event and major struggle, and all I've gotten from her is judgment. She was upset by my reaction, but things really took a turn when I told her I wouldn't attend her wedding if it meant having to choose between her and Sophie. My sister was furious and called me selfish, saying I was making her wedding all about me and not respecting her wishes. She even went as far as to say that I was trying to ruin her big day and that if I loved her, I would make the sacrifice to put my friend aside for the occasion. At this point, things got more heated. My sister began involving our parents, who, of course, took her side. They said that I was being unreasonable and disrespectful to the whole family. They even said I was making this all about a friendship that wasn't even important enough to be at the wedding. I tried to explain that this wasn't about a friendship, but about respecting the people I care about, and Sophie was one of the few people who always had my back. But the more I tried to explain, the more they piled on with their opinions about how important this wedding was and how family should come first. Now, I'm stuck in a situation where my sister won't talk to me unless I agree to not bring Sophie to the wedding, and my parents are pressuring me to just let it go. I feel like I'm being asked to compromise my values to maintain peace, and I'm really struggling with whether or not I should go through with it. I've tried to suggest alternatives, like having Sophie attend as a guest, but not part of the wedding party, or even having a separate gathering after the wedding, but my sister refuses to budge. I get that it's her big day, but at what point do I stand up for what I believe is right? I really don't want to lose my sister over this, but I also can't just turn my back on Sophie. Am I in the wrong here for refusing to go to my sister's wedding if Sophie isn't invited? Is it unreasonable to expect my sister to at least accept my best friend at the wedding, even if she's uncomfortable? So, AITA for not wanting to go to my sister's wedding if Sophie can't come? AITA for refusing to allow my sister-in-law to stay at my house after she made a scene at my wedding? 28F, marry my husband, Dan, 30M, about 2 weeks ago. Our wedding was small, but meaningful, just close family and a few friends. My family and Dan's family are both pretty easygoing, so we didn't have too much drama leading up to the wedding. That is, until my sister-in-law, Clara, 32F, decided to make things difficult. Clara and I have never gotten along, but I've always tried to be polite and cordial. The tension between us started when Dan and I first started dating, and she's always seemed to feel threatened by me for reasons I can't quite pinpoint. She's never directly said anything rude, but she'll make snide remarks, or when we're in a group, she'll leave me out of the conversation. I've tried to just let it go and not let it bother me. Dan and I have had several talks about it, and he's always said that I shouldn't take it personally and that Clara has her own issues she's working through. He's very close to her, so he's protective, and I don't want to cause any rifts, so I've done my best to stay civil. At our wedding, Clara made it clear that she wasn't happy. She didn't outright complain about the venue, the food, or anything like that. It was more subtle. During the reception, she started to complain to anyone who would listen about how disappointing it was, how she didn't like the music, and how the whole thing was too small. At one point, she came up to me and said, if you had done this properly, you would have had a much bigger event. This feels more like a birthday party than a wedding. I just smiled and said, I'm happy with how it turned out. Later in the evening, during the speeches, Clara took it upon herself to make a toast, though no one had asked her to speak. She stood up and started talking about how great Dan was and how lucky I was to have him. At first, I thought it was just another one of her attempts to put me down by pretending to praise Dan, but then she started talking about me in a way that felt like a backhanded insult. She said something like, Dan is truly an amazing person, and I know he'll do everything to make his wife happy because I know her type. I mean, I've known Dan for his whole life, and I know how high maintenance some people can be, but I have faith that Dan can handle it. The whole room went silent. People started looking at each other awkwardly, and I could see Dan's face turning bright red. I was embarrassed and furious. Dan tried to step in and cut her off, but she kept going, making comments about how marriage was hard and how I'd better be ready for the realities of being a wife. I could see the discomfort in the crowd. A few people were looking at me with concern, but I couldn't say anything in that moment because I didn't want to make a scene at the wedding. After that, Clara spent the rest of the night sulking and being unpleasant. She didn't participate in the dancing, refused to take pictures with anyone, and made it very clear she was unhappy with the whole event. I kept my distance and tried to focus on enjoying the day with Dan, but it definitely cast a shadow over the evening. After the wedding, Clara reached out to Dan and told him she was hurt by how things went down. She said she felt excluded and disrespected by my side of the family, and that she was just trying to look out for him. Dan was, as usual, very understanding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Clara was being manipulative. She's done this in the past, try to guilt-trip Dan into siding with her or making me feel bad for something that's out of my control. A few days ago, Clara called me and asked if she could stay with us for a few days. She said she was going through some personal stuff and needed a place to stay. I'm not unsympathetic to her situation, but I couldn't ignore the way she treated me at the wedding. I said no, explaining that Dan and I had just settled into our new routine as a married couple and that I didn't think it would be a good idea to have her stay with us, especially given the tension between us. I also reminded her of how uncomfortable the wedding had been and how she had acted out of line. Claire didn't take it well. She accused me of being petty and holding a grudge. She said I was trying to punish her for speaking her mind and that it was ridiculous I would hold a wedding grudge this long. She called me selfish for not helping her out in her time of need and told me she would never forget this. Dan and I had a long talk about it. He understands my position, but also wants to keep the peace with his sister. He suggested that I could just let it go and invite Clara to stay, but I really don't feel comfortable with that, especially after everything that happened. I feel like Clara hasn't apologized or taken responsibility for how she acted, and I don't think I should have to just forget about it. I told Dan that I felt this was an issue he should handle with his sister, not me, but he's caught in the middle and doesn't want to make a decision that will alienate either of us. Now, Clara is continuing to make comments about how I've turned Dan against her and how I'm the one who's ruining the family. I'm at my wit's end. I want to be a good wife and keep the peace, but I also don't want to let someone disrespect me and get away with it. I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, AITA for refusing to let Clara stay with us after the way she acted at the wedding? Should I just let it go and let her stay? Or am I justified in holding my ground? AITA for not letting my best friend's fiance stay with me after they moved to my city? I, 28M, live in a pretty small but cozy apartment in the city. It's not much, but it's home. I've lived here for about 3 years now, and over time, I've made a good group of friends. One of those friends, Sarah, 29F, has been my best friend since high school. We've been through a lot together, supporting each other through bad breakups, family drama, job struggles, and so on. She's one of those friends that I trust with everything. We have a very strong friendship, and I know she has my back just like I have hers. A few months ago, Sarah got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Jake, 30M, and they made the decision to move to my city for work. They're both from a small town, and the city offers better career opportunities, so it seemed like a great move. When they announced the move, Sarah was beyond excited and kept mentioning how great it would be for us to finally be in the same city after years of living far apart. I was also happy for her, of course, but I didn't expect everything to change so quickly. Here's where the situation starts to get tricky. A few weeks ago, Sarah asked me if Jake and she could stay at my apartment for a couple of weeks when they first arrived. They hadn't yet found an apartment, and moving into a new city is always a pain, so she said they just needed a temporary place to crash until they could get settled. She assured me it wouldn't be a big deal and that it'd just be for a couple of weeks. Now, to be completely honest, my apartment is small. It's a one-bedroom with barely enough space for me, let alone 2 people. I knew this was going to be a bit of a tight squeeze, but I didn't want to say no to Sarah. She's my best friend, and I wanted to help her out, so I agreed. We set a date for them to arrive, and I cleared out some space in the living room for an air mattress and some of their things. The first couple of days weren't too bad, but after that, things started to feel off. For one, Jake, who I hadn't spent much time with before, was difficult. He's a nice guy on the surface, but I started noticing little things that bothered me. For one, he was constantly leaving his stuff everywhere. I had to clean up after him, even though I was already trying to make space for him in my apartment. Then there were the noise issues. I'm a person who likes a quiet, peaceful environment. But Jake seemed to think it was perfectly fine to talk loudly on the phone with friends during late hours, or play music or watch TV at full volume when I was trying to get some sleep. At first, I thought maybe he just wasn't used to the idea of sharing space with someone else, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't just an adjustment period. As the days went by, I found myself feeling more and more irritated. I had to tiptoe around my own apartment to avoid disturbing them, which didn't feel fair at all. I get that they were going through a big transition, but I was starting to feel like I was the one being inconvenienced. And Sarah, despite knowing how I felt about it, didn't seem to do much to address the situation. She'd ask me every day how things were going, but when I brought up my frustrations, she'd brush it off and say I was being too sensitive or that I should be patient because they were going through a lot. I wanted to be supportive, but I was starting to resent how things were playing out. A week into their stay, things came to a head. One night, I came home from work, exhausted and in need of some downtime. I was looking forward to just sitting on the couch, watching some TV, and maybe having a quiet dinner. But when I walked in, Jake and Sarah were in the living room having a loud conversation with one of Jake's old friends on speakerphone. The TV was on at full blast, and there was a bunch of their stuff scattered all over the place. I just lost it. I didn't yell or anything, but I calmly told them that I needed some space and that they couldn't keep doing this. I told them they were making it really hard for me to relax in my own home, and that I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Jake didn't take it well. He told me I was being selfish and that he and Sarah were already under enough stress with the move, and I should be more understanding. Sarah tried to calm him down, but I could tell that I had crossed some line. She apologized to me later, but Jake barely spoke to me the rest of the night, which only made the situation more uncomfortable. The next day, Sarah came to me and said that maybe it would be best if Jake and I had some space. I agreed, but I was still upset. It wasn't just about the noise or the mess. It was about how I felt completely disregarded in my own home and how I wasn't being listened to. They weren't here for just a couple of weeks like they promised, and now it seemed like they were planning to stay for longer. I was feeling trapped and frustrated. I had been trying to be a good friend, but at this point, it was starting to feel like I was doing more for them than they were doing for me. Eventually, I had to lay it out for Sarah. I told her that I didn't think it was fair for me to keep putting up with this, and that it wasn't just about the two of them needing a place to stay. It was about the way Jake was treating me and the way she was not stepping up to address the situation. I told her that I didn't feel like I could continue hosting them, and that they needed to find somewhere else to stay. Sarah was devastated. She said she understood, but it was clear that she was upset. She asked me if I was really going to let something like this come between us, and I told her I didn't want it to, but I also needed to stand up for myself. In the end, they moved out and found a place to rent, but Sarah hasn't been the same since. She's still my best friend, but things feel different. She's distant, and she hasn't really been as open with me about her life since then. Now I'm questioning myself. Did I overreact? AITA for asking them to leave when they were already going through such a big change in their lives? I feel like I made the right decision, but at the same time, I don't want to lose my friendship with Sarah. AITA, thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.